take a moment to say a word of prayer. Oh God, open us up. Open our eyes that we might see. Open our hearts that they might be wild. Oh God, open our ears that we might hear your word for us today. And then, oh God, open our hands that when we leave here, we might leave here and serve you. Amen. Have you ever taken a few moments to step back and ponder your life? You know, I don't do this very often, but I ran across a song, and sometimes I share parts of lyrics, but I'm going to share all of the lyrics from a song. So the song is My Life by Pam Rose. I want to know if I walk down a certain road, it was my choice. And I want to know if I had something to say, I raised my voice. I don't want to wake up a little too late and say I could have done this or I should have done that. When I close my eyes at night, I want to know I'm doing the best I can. When I'm sitting there in my rocking chair looking at my life, I hope to God I would have done something good with my life. At the end of the day, I can only pray that I can look back and say, I lived my life. I lived my life. Don't want to take my father's path. I gotta make my own. Don't want my epitaph to read, wish they could have known me. I don't want that carved in stone. I want to leave this place with a smile on my face, knowing what's in my heart didn't just stay in my heart. And whatever heaven gave me, I want to know I gave it all back. When I'm sitting there in my rocking chair, looking at my life, I hope to God I would have done something good with my life. At the end of the day, I can only pray that I can look back and say, I lived my life. When you look back over your life, do you see storms? Are there storms there? I can think of a few. I remember once I was on my way out to church. I was going to help with youth group, and there was a storm blowing through town. The wind was awful. And our ground, it was heaving like it was breathing. It would rise up in our backyard and go back down and rise up again with every gust. And it was right next to a large tree. Every time the wind blew, it would pull its roots just a little bit more out of the ground. But you know, there was nothing I could do about it, so I went ahead and came over here to church, and about 5 minutes after walking in the door, I got a call that the tree had fallen. We were lucky. It had a fence. It nicked the neighbor's gutter, but it fell right between two houses, basically missing both of them. It missed the cable line that was on the other side. It missed the cars that it could have hit. We were lucky. But it wasn't the luckiest moment. You see, a couple of years before, we had had something similar happen. Another storm, but this time in the middle of the night. We were sleeping, and I remember being woken up. I heard a loud thump. And I looked around the house, and I didn't see anything, checked on my kiddos, and they were doing fine. And so I went right back to sleep. And when we woke up in the morning and went outside, we discovered what that thump was. Right above our bed, a tree had fallen. A really big, old tree. We live downtown, so a lot of downtown trees are big and old, and it fell right above our bed, indenting the roof. It took a massive crane to come sit in the road and lift that out from right between the two houses. We were pretty lucky. What about you? What about the storms in your life? I wonder what the disciples thought of as they sat down and wrote this story and talked about this story, about this time in their life when they ran across, when a storm ran across them. Listen now to this word from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 8, verse 22 through 25. One day, Jesus got into a boat with his disciples and said to them, "Let us go across to the other side of the lake." So they put out, and while they were sailing, Jesus fell asleep. A windstorm swept down on the lake, and the boat was filling with water, and they were in danger. They went to him and woke him up, shouting, "Master, Master, we are perishing." And he woke up and rebuked the wind and the raging waves. They ceased, and there was a calm. He said to them, "Where is your faith?" They were afraid and amazed and said to one another, "Who then is this that he commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him?" May God bless the reading, the hearing, and the doing of this word. We're in the middle of a sermon series, Life Interrupted. We're taking just moments from the life of Jesus where he was interrupted. And I was sure all week that what I was going to preach on was being woken up by storms. And in fact, like this week, I was woken up in the middle of the night, not in the middle of the night, really, really early, that felt like the middle of the night, but by a phone call that one of the alarms was going off down at the Edge building. And what did we want the alarm company to do? Have you ever been woken up? There was another time when we had a knock on the door in the middle of the night. And there was a police officer standing there, and you know, your heart starts beating so fast. And he asked, "Do you own a 2003 Eclipse?" And that second I knew, and I said, "No, sir, we don't." But my husband was really frustrated with me when I sold the car and forgot to get the tags. Have you ever been woken up? I just knew that that's what this sermon was going to be about. But the more I looked at it, the more I studied, the more I was drawn to the disciples in this moment, to the disciples in the middle of this storm. They were not asleep. They were wide awake. And in fact, they probably saw that storm coming as it came over the mountains. You have to remember the disciples were very experienced fishermen. They had done it their entire lives, inherited this from the family, practice, and they've done this a long time. They knew what they were doing. When that storm hit, I doubt they were just frightened and worried. They'd been through storms. They'd probably been through many storms. They knew what to do. They knew how to handle this. They knew what their next steps were. And yet, that storm scared them. Have you ever, in your life, looking back and pondering, can you see storms in your life? Maybe you saw them coming. Maybe they woke you up. Maybe you can look over the last year and see how our lives were so interrupted by a storm. Maybe for you it was a little storm. Maybe for you it was a really big storm. Can you look back beyond the last year and see the storms even before that? There's a story that we share, some more Methodist history. Our founder, John Wesley, tells about a storm. He talks about the storm on a boat. He was coming over from England, and a storm blew in onto the ship, and those from England started screaming and crying. They were so afraid. And in fact, one of the women brought her baby to Wesley to baptize because she knew that they were about to die. But at the same time, the Moravians had just started worship. They were singing the Psalms. And John Wesley says they were singing their psalm and continuing to worship. And in his words, John says, the sea broke over, spilt the mainsail in pieces, covered the ship, and poured between the decks as if the great deep had already taken them. They were in great danger. And yet, the Moravians continued in worship. They continued their worship, their songs, their prayer. And John saw in them a deep faith. It's not that they were thinking they were just going to survive it. They knew they might die, but they knew that they were in the hands of a loving God, even through that storm. Looking back, sitting in the rocking chair, looking back, you can see in John's life how that storm, how it was an outside storm, but it continued, it almost started, showed, revealed an internal storm in him. And for the next few years, he wrestled and grappled with, what does faith mean? How am I supposed to live? What is this supposed to do for me? So that one storm that happened on that one night in 1736, it started in him another storm until he found what he was looking for. And I wonder if the disciples, sitting in a rocking chair, looking back over their life, over the interruptions and the storms, I wonder what they would see in this time. I wonder if they would have remembered the storm, the winds and the waves. I wonder if they would remember that fear that engulfed them. I wonder if they would talk about Jesus waking up and rebuking the winds and the waves. And I wonder if they would talk about how amazed and how afraid they were. They wouldn't tell us about the peace that came over them at the end of the storm, but instead the fear at the power that they found themselves in. I wonder if they would talk about that storm and how that storm helped them live through the storms that would continue to happen for the rest of their lives. I wonder if they would look back on that storm and see it as a moment that they grew in their faith, that they learned that they could survive the storms. I wonder if they would look back on that moment and if they would realize that even through the rest of their lives, they encountered storms that brought them to their knees and even brought them to death. If they could look back and hold on to this storm as a moment in their lives that they learned and they grew. Tell me, when has a storm interrupted your life?
Before that greatest of storms that Jesus had to face with his disciples, he gathered his beloveds together and they shared a meal together, a meal of preparation for the rest of their lives and then preparation for us. After the meal, he took the bread and he broke it. He gave thanks to God. Take this and eat it. This is my flesh given for you. This is my body given for you. And when the meal was over, further preparation for what was to come, he took the cup of the new covenant and said, this is the cup of the new covenant, and it's the blood of my life. It's life for you. They drank it. God, prepare these elements of body, blood, that we may feast upon them as you, as our life. Let us partake. God, send us forth now prepared for any storm life may throw at us. Send us forth from this place with trust in you. We carry you with us, nourished by your life, your death,